Tommy, we got Randy on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Randy, you say you want operators who are cut and dry, plain and simple, like relatively boring. Now, is that just for one asset class, or do you like to see operators who can play the different fields?
I think track record starts long before people get into commercial real estate. So you've got a track record back to high school, into college, into your service right now. So I think your expertise can translate into other avenues. And ultimately, as a new guy just getting started, you have to rely on that because that's the track record and credibility you have to share.
I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different than everything else out there. I bring together a new and an experienced investor on each episode, and I let the aspiring investor ask the questions that they need answered. So if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably will have the exact same questions. Now, before we get to this episode, make sure you hit the subscribe button below and that little bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe. I'm very excited for today's show. We got two great guys on the line with us. We got our experienced investor, Randy Smith, and our aspiring investor, Tommy Feraco. So guys, welcome to the show today.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Brian.
Glad to be here, Brian.
Awesome. And Randy, just for the listeners, Randy knows this, but I just came on his podcast recently, The Gentle Art of Crushing It. I think that's an awesome podcast name, by the way. I mean, if I had a do-over, I would have picked that first so that I could have it for my podcast. But anyway, Randy, how's it going today?
It's going really well. As I mentioned to you, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona, and we're having some AC issues. So it's a little warmer than I'd prefer. But other than that, I'm doing fantastic.
What's the temperature in Phoenix today?
I think
we're going to hit 120.
Yeah, 116, maybe 117. Yeah.
Reminds me of Iraq in the summer, to be honest with you. That's the only other place I've been that gets that hot. So, wow, I don't envy you one bit, but hopefully you get that fixed soon.
Yeah. Yep. Any moment now, hopefully.
Yeah. We're on a warm streak here in Idaho. It hit 90 yesterday. And, we were outside and my kids were just like, oh my gosh, it's hot out here. It's only 90, but when you're used to less, it's, yeah. But anyway, let's stop talking about the weather and start talking about, I don't know, apartments or something like that. But Randy, do us a favor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm, as you mentioned, my name's Randy Smith. I am today the founder of Impact Equity, which is a real estate investment firm that helps the new or newer passive investor find their first or their next passive investment deal. We like to provide investors with an opportunity to find diversification across deals and operators and asset classes and geographies and give them that diversification that they were trying to find in the stock market as well. So prior to this, I've been the founder of Impact for about a year, but prior to that, I spent about 25 years in corporate America. I was with a couple of Fortune 100, Fortune 200 companies in various sales and sales leadership roles. Finally got the itch to go down the entrepreneurial path and try to decrease my dependence on that W-2 because it seemed like every time I started getting comfortable, there were layoffs just around the corner, or a new business strategy, or something totally changing out of left field. And I was ready to step away from that about 5 or 6 years ago.
Was there a catalyst or a single moment that happened, or did this kind of like build up over time?
Yeah, good question. And it's interesting. So I loved my career in corporate America. I did very well. I got a ton of accolades and won a bunch of awards. I was a top performer. So I had quite a bit of autonomy. I got to pretty much do whatever I wanted to do. But, I had actually been laid off from another job that I was in for about 10 years. And at the time when I got laid off, I had no other prospects. I had really nothing else lined up. I had put everything into this career. And while I did get a severance package, every day that ticked by, it got more and more scary of what am I going to do? How am I going to find a job? I started getting more and more desperate. And then fortunately, just before that severance were to wear off, I ended up finding the other job. And it was just always in the back of my mind in corporate America. Every 2 or 3 years, there would be some reorg or restructuring or layoffs or whatever it was. So in the back of your mind, you never really feel confident and you're just kind of waiting for something to happen, regardless of how good you are. It doesn't even matter. So that was kind of the big thing. And, as luck would have it, I spent probably 5 years investing in real estate before the last layoff occurred.
Yep.
And at that point, I had a lot more options.
Now, were you investing in commercial real estate, single family real estate? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I started out in single family.
Mhm.
I owned a couple of turnkeys in Kansas City, and then I did some burr investing in Atlanta, Georgia. We actually did very, very well. We created a bunch of capital. We had a lot of capital gains when we finally sold those houses. But a few years ago, we made the switch from active investing in residential over to passive investing
Mhm.
in commercial real estate. And that was really
Nice.
kind of when that light came on, where it's like, oh my God, if I put enough capital in this space and keep earning really good money, but then shift that capital over into the passive space, like I'll be set in 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And ultimately that's kind of what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's nice. It's nice. And when you're talking about your history, I think most people who listen know I spent 20 years in the military. I remember, coming up at the end of a tour in 2009, I really, really wanted to get out, but the economy was in a tailspin, and it was part of the reason I stayed in was, I didn't like where the economy wasn't 100% sure I'd be able to get a job or keep a job. And my dad, both my brothers and my sister had all lost a job in that year. And so it was just kind of like, I better cling on to this. I better hold on to this salary for a bit. But I mean, so yeah, there's always something around the corner, it seems. And that kept me in, longer than I had originally intended. But yeah, it's something that happens to everybody. Now, going back, one more question. You started out by saying that your focus is on, first-time apartment investors or people who are new to apartment investing as your focus. Why did you choose that as your focus?
Yeah. So as I dug into it, I ended up investing, I think, in 10 or 12, maybe 13 deals before I ended up getting laid off.
Yep.
And there's this huge line in the sand where corporate America just does not know about this space.
Yep.
And I know, coming from that space, that if you're in your late 40s and you're looking at your 401k and you start doing the math on that, it becomes pretty apparent that if I keep doing what I'm doing, even though I'm doing exactly what they tell me to do, max out the 401ks and try to set as much aside as you can, I'm still going to have to work till my 60s.
Yeah.
And to me, it's just insane. I've seen far too many people that say they're going to do that, and then they start having health issues. Then they start quality of life really starts to deteriorate. So it's important to me to help educate those people in that space that there's more options, and you don't have to follow that 401k hamster wheel that they've been pitching for 40 years. So I picked that because it was a prior version of me ultimately. And it's just easy for me to talk to that avatar.
It is. And that is the easiest way to pick an avatar, is pick a prior version or pick a group that you already belong to. Some people have kind of a soft place in their hearts, and that's kind of what becomes their avatar. And it's, nothing wrong with that at all, but I appreciate you sharing that. That's awesome. And I mean, you're right. It's interesting, what I always look at, what the investing marketplace classifies real estate as an alternative investment, which it still makes me laugh every time I hear that, because, long before the markets existed, real estate was the only investment, but I guess it depends on how far back you go. But anyway, that's that. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about some of the projects you guys have done. So, pick one that you like to talk about, and let's talk about it a little bit.
My very first project on the active side, again, after getting laid off, was with a partner that I had invested with very, very heavily, a group called Rise 48 Equity. Most folks in the space know of them. They're a very, very big player. And, I ended up essentially sharing the deals that I had been investing with personally to my close network. And it was very easy for me to talk about those. And that first deal that I did with Rise 48, call it, I guess it's almost 2.5 years ago. It was a classic, B minus C plus value add 200+ unit apartment here in Phoenix, Arizona. It was their classic, paint lipstick on the outside, add a dog park, fix up the gym, that type of thing, and then raise the rents. And ultimately, we ended up going full cycle on that deal in 14 months and got a 1.8 equity multiple. So it's really easy to get excited about those type of deals. And my excitement basically translated to my network, because I had referred probably $1 million to Zach and the team before I even left my W-2. So it was the natural progression for me to show, like, I've been doing this and now I'm going to offer it to you guys. And this is why I think it's so fantastic.
Yeah. Real estate. I mean, man, if more people knew about this, more people would be investing. I firmly believe that. And if the stock brokerages of the world or money managers of the world could figure out how to, make money from it, they'd offer it as well. So.
Yeah. And I look at it too, like I didn't even know the syndication model or private placements. I didn't even know they existed when I was 44, 45 years old. And had I found that in my 30s, or, gosh, I have some investors that are in their late 20s that are doing this. And it just blows my mind, the opportunity that could be in place by just putting small amount of dollars consistently over time, dollar cost averaging into deals. Yeah, I think our retirement age could be a lot lower than it is today.
Yeah, but the government doesn't want us to stop working early. I mean, come on, really?
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. We need folks in the working
We
years,
need
definitely.
people working. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I say that half tongue in cheek, but I'm probably more true. It's probably more true than I want to believe. Yeah. But so lost track of thought. Now I found it again. My old age is creeping in. You mentioned, back when you were 40 something, we're probably about the same age, and that old man disease is creeping in. But so you mentioned kind of like some of the economic reasons for doing this. Can you go a step or two deeper on why you're doing this? So basically what I'm asking is, what is your why?
Yeah, so anybody can talk about the dollars, and I think that that's a big piece of this. But I think the reason why the dollars become important is kind of that next level. And my wife and I, we both came from families that I would say middle to lower income. Even though my family lived as if they were much better off than their income would present. We both kind of were raised in an environment where we didn't have a lot. We ended up making a lot of mistakes with our finances for a lot of years that I did not actually end up digging my way out of until I was in my late 30s and early 40s, transparently. So, why I do today, what I do is to really help those folks that are going down those similar paths and maybe be able to help educate and inspire them to a point where they don't have to go down those paths that I went down, because there is nothing worse than carrying around credit card debt and other bad debt and ultimately being stuck in a job that you absolutely despise and hate because you got to make a paycheck to pay whatever all those stupid bills are that you have. So, the almighty dollar, not to go get the Lambos and the crazy vacations and all that stuff, that is part of the deal. But the bigger piece of that is really helping people kind of move away from this dependence on, really an unhealthy dependence on bad debt and credit card bills and those types of things, and help to teach them that there's a better way.
Yeah. I like it. Well, awesome. Well, last question for you. And that's what's next?
Impact Equity is still fairly new. I launched it about a year ago, but we've helped, I think to date, about 85 investors. And our goal is to help 1,000 investors with their first or next passive investment in the next 10 years. So really it's building the systems, building the partnerships, building the infrastructure for an education facility that'll help bring those folks into the ecosystem and then help them decrease their dependence on their W-2. So
Nice.
that is the big plan.
So basically you're going to keep on doing what you're doing at a higher level.
Hoping to do it at an entirely different level. Yeah. So I just read that book, the 10X is easier than 2X. I don't want to go just a little bit bigger. I really want to shift to the next gear and be able to impact a much broader population than what I've been doing up to this point.
So, I mean, one thing I always wonder, if 10X is easier than 2X, is 100X easier than 10X?
I think you can make the argument. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, maybe that's what we should be trying to do, is 100X instead of 10X. But
I think that's the next book in the series, maybe, right?
Yeah, maybe I'll write that one. Here's what I tried to do. Tried to 100X things instead of 10Xing things. I only got 50. Darn it, right? But,
darned. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna switch gears and bring Tommy on. So, Tommy, what's up, man?
Hey, how's it going, Brian? Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on. Very, very much appreciate it. So, how are things going?
Good. Yeah, just starting to get some things in the works over the past couple of months, shifting a little bit from single family to multifamily. So, been good. New in the space.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself? Start with your background, and I'll throw this out there before you start. Thanks for your service, by the way, because I'm sure that's probably going to come up. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So my name's Tommy Feraco. I've been 2 years active duty in the Army as of last week, actually. We go back to my college years. My initial plan was to just save and continue to save. So working through college, working summers, working part-time jobs while going to school, because I just wanted to save and create a financial nest egg for my future. And a lot of that went towards stocks. And the biggest thing that pulled me towards things like stocks was dividends and the ability to compound and grow your wealth in a way. That wasn't until I met one of my roommates, actually, who was in the real estate space.
Mhm.
His parents down in Louisiana owned about 90 units or so, all single family homes. So they had quite a bit big portfolio, and that's what they did full time, was just running those single family homes. So I was very intrigued with that. I wanted to learn more about that and pursue something like that, knowing that I had a full-time contract with the Army afterwards, something that could be done additionally with that to supplement a retirement in the future. So I graduate, and then I decided to take a road trip down from my home state, Massachusetts, down to Louisiana to learn more about their business, to get more hands-on and learn what they do in a day-to-day.
Mhm.
I certainly learned a lot. I'm grateful for it to this day. So, but one thing I did, I saw that how much it took to run 90 single family homes, and that there was bigger things out there that would create more leverage and less time for myself. So beginning off, when I got back home, I made a plan to, at my first duty station, to really take that first jump. I had some money I saved up in the past and wanted to pursue my first deal while I was at my first duty station. And I knew, doing a little market research back where that was going to be, and I knew the criteria I needed. And then I pursued a single family home with my fiance at the time, fixed it up, and that was that became a long-term rental. And then shortly, a couple months after that, I found another single family and pretty much did the same thing. But the only problem was I just didn't have the capital.
Yeah.
Just starting off, it's a big friction point that a lot of investors have, especially starting off, was not having the capital. So got a little creative, did a little research, and found that I still had access to what's called the career starter loan. And I used that for a down payment and the ability to rehab the property. Yeah, fast forward a little bit, about 4 months after that, I joined a war room, the mastermind, which is called the War Room, was strictly military, prior service, active duty veterans who were at all stages of their career, as well as real estate endeavors. And then that's where I found my two other partners. And we formed what's called Rolling Rook Capital, and we look to leverage and grow ourselves up from there.
Awesome.
So that's where we sit today.
Awesome. Now, I'm just guessing, I mean, you said a couple of years in the Army, graduating college. I'm guessing you're mid-20s right now. I first of all commend you for starting so early. I think Randy and I are both on the other side of the table looking back at you and saying, man, I wish I would have done what he's doing right now. But so great on that one. And, good job being creative as well. I mean, I think the career starter loan, for people who don't know, is something that there's a couple of financial institutions will give to military members when they're first starting out. It's kind of aimed at, getting you on your feet, and buying all your uniforms, which are several $1,000s, but some institutions are going to give you like $20K at a really low interest rate. But that's what he's talking about. And I remember 20 something years ago thinking I should just take that loan and invest it somewhere. But the honest answer was I had no idea where. So anyway, good on you for figuring that one out and taking advantage of what's available to you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so next question, and then we'll roll into your questions. Actually, you'll have all the rest, but what's your reason? What's your why for doing this?
Yeah, no, and like a lot of people who are in the real estate space, it comes down to getting their time back. I believe that like capital has a lot of leverage to it. And I really want to take that and turn it into more time I can spend with my family, with my friends, and really do what I want without want in life. And a lot of that comes down to taking care of my family, taking care of my parents. They've been my biggest supporters. They were actually my first private investors in a deal. So they really believe in me. They really took a chance on me. So I want to get to the point where money is never a concern for them ever again. And then, I mean, I really joined the Army, joined the military just to give back and to take care and protect people. So I don't know exactly what that looks like right now, but I know I want to be doing something to have a greater impact on people's lives in the future. Because like I said, capital has a lot of leverage to it.
All right. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, here comes my favorite part of the show. Tommy, we got Randy on the line. What do you want to ask him?
Hey, Randy, what's going on? Yeah, I got a bunch of questions here. So looking at this from the perspective of an operator, as well as maybe someone who wants to passively invest in a deal as an LP, what does your due diligence look like on a deal?
Yeah, really good question, Tommy, and probably the most important question. But actually, before I answer that, I do want to thank you for your service, and as Brian did, commend you for getting started so earlier in the space. It's amazing to think where you might be when you are Brian and my age. It'll be very, very exciting, I'm sure. So yeah, so due diligence is, ultimately, it's probably the most important thing for new investors or for operators or for potential partners to really dig into. And I think it can look like a lot of different things, and it really depends on where your strengths are. Myself, I am primarily a passive investor. So my biggest due diligence piece that I've always wanted to check in on is taking a look at track record, make sure that they have done what they say that they're going to do many, many times before, possibly for years or decades, and then really just getting to know what that looks like. I know there's a lot of operators out there that they like to do a lot of different things. They might do retail, they might do multifamily, they might do self-storage, or a whole combination of all kinds of other things. And personally, I don't like to work with operators that are doing a bunch of different types of business plans. I like really, really boring, same thing, cookie cutter over and over and over and over again, with the same business plan that is tried and true, and they've probably ran into a large portion of the issues that they've are likely to run into in the future. So I think first and foremost, always take a look at track record. Personally, I also like to since I am not a very, very strong underwriter, I can question assumptions that are built into the underwriting, but getting into the tools, I've not done the thousands of underwriting on different deals. So I personally like to hire a third-party underwriter to have them really do a gut check on the underwriting and make sure everything's, perfect. So I find guys that are really, really, really good at underwriting and make sure that they're underwriting well. I like to dig into the assumptions on exit cap rates, what our rent projections or rent increase is going to look like, expense increase is going to look like, and then even spend even more time looking at the tax estimates and the insurance estimates and where they're getting those from, because those seem to be the two biggest areas that cause issues today. So yeah, I think you could probably find 100 questions for due diligence and on a deal out there pretty easily, but I think first and foremost, look at track record first.
I would say operators, have to be number one. And for good reason, you're asking that question. Well, one other thing that I would add, track record is important, but make sure you have shared values. I think that's more important. I would say look at that before you start looking at track record, because that'll weed out a lot of people that you'll find out later you never want to work with, or you shouldn't have worked with in the beginning. So make sure you have shared value, shared vision for the future. That's sometimes harder to figure out than track record, but I think it's just as important to make sure that you align on those areas as well.
And yeah, Brian, I think that's a really good point. I see so many times where people, they want to jump into partnerships and jump into investments like within 30, 60, 90 days of meeting an operator. And personally, I think it's really important to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch them for 6, 12, 18 months before you jump into partnerships, but maybe even so with other investments as well, because over any amount of time, an operator or a partner will show their true colors. And it's far too easy for somebody to show up good on one 30-minute call. Much, much harder to do that over multiple interactions or different venues and different things as well. So yeah, that's a really good point, Brian.
Randy, you say you want typically operators who are cut and dry, plain and simple, relatively boring. Now, is that just for one asset class, or do you like to see operators who can play the different fields?
I think track record starts long before people get into commercial real estate. So you've got a track record back to high school, into college, into your service right now. So I think your expertise can translate into other avenues. And ultimately, as a new guy just getting started, you have to rely on that, because that's the track record and credibility you have to share. Now, for my personal investment dollars and my investors' investment dollars, I like to place my capital and have my investors' capital placed with folks that have been doing one thing and one thing only for quite some time. So in fact, one of my operators, they were exclusively Phoenix And then they started doing some stuff in Dallas. And I had no doubt that they would be able to make the transition to Dallas, but I did not invest in their first couple or 3 deals that they did in Dallas because I love this operator more than anybody out there. But again, I want them to go test their skills, test their market knowledge, test their expertise on somebody else's dollars versus my own.
Yeah, good point. And then something I'll add to that, kind of give you the opposite example. I know a lot of guys that were raising capital for multifamily 3, 4, 5 years ago that have transitioned to something else, and they're doing self-storage or industrial or oil and gas or, whatever else is come up. Some people are doing I haven't seen one of these investment opportunities in a while, but like the Bitcoin mining and things like that, and where that comes in is, the people who invested with them 3 years ago on a 5-year hold, now they're looking at, okay, they've now made like 3 pivots, 3 transitions right now. Are they really taking care of my money? I think that's really what, and I'm not trying to put your words into your mouth, Randy, but I think that's what he's saying is he wants people who are boring, who are going to stick to multifamily long-term. And so he doesn't have to worry about, whether or not 2 years from now, they're going to be doing something completely different.
Exactly. Yeah. And I look at a guy like you, Brian, you've been doing multifamily for years, right? And you might switch markets, but markets do change.
Mhm.
And for you to pick up shop and move your whole operations to Salt Lake City, as an example, that is absolutely something you can do. But if you were to move into mixed use retail storage or something, I don't know, I'd want to see you have some experience before I'd give you some money there. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you what, I'm boring. I do multifamily and I'm going to be doing Salt Lake City for a long time. So I'd put money on the line today. I bet you money today that you can come to me 5 years from now and I'm doing the same thing.
I might just, put some dollars on that bet with you. So yes.
All right. Tommy, back to you, man.
Yeah. If an operator were to approach you today to co-GP a deal, what are you looking for and what questions are you really asking them before you really jump into a deal with them?
So it's a good question. It happens all the time. Once I found in this space, once you show that you can raise a few dollars, everybody and their brother wants you to raise capital for them. So, generally what I do is I will have a nice polite conversation with people, talk about their track record, ask to be put on their distribution list and say, yes, let's definitely stay in contact. I'm going to watch on the sidelines. If I can meet these folks in person, if I can walk their properties, the best thing possible is to be referred to them by somebody else is generally the best way for me to meet somebody. And actually how I met all of my partners, quite frankly, that probably has the strongest piece. But, the idea of asking for referrals to me is just it's the most silly activity in the world. Anybody's got 2 or 3 really great referrals they can give you. I want to get referred to them by somebody who's anonymous that has not been vetted, essentially. So those are kind of the first things that I'll do.
I think strong thing right there. Get to know people, and that's important. All right. I don't have much to add to that one.
Yeah, pretty simple.
Yeah.
Shifting more towards raising capital and attaining it for deals, it can certainly be one of the more challenging struggles and higher barrier to entry to get into something like this, especially for a new investor. What did it look like for you when you were first getting started, and what pieces of advice do you have for someone who could be new in this space?
Yeah. So it's interesting. A lot of people think capital raising is easy, and people will go down the GP side and want to get involved in the industry. And when they try that for a year or so and it doesn't go well, then they think, well, I'll just become a capital raiser because that's easy. And what I'll share, Brian's laughing at me because he knows capital raising. Well, the bottom line is when you need capital, it's hard to get. And when you don't need it, it's really, really easy to get. So now it's a little more difficult to get capital. So my journey was a little bit different. And when people early on asked me what did success look like and why was I seeing success early on, I would say it's really, really easy. Just go be a sales guy at a top performing Fortune 100 company for 25 years and then become a capital raiser. That's how you do it. All joking aside, what it is I've raised probably 80% of my capital from my network. And those are people that I worked with, people that were my clients, friends and family. And then since then, probably my largest lead source now is referrals. So people that have invested with me have referred other people. So when somebody comes to me and they ask how to raise capital, I will always say, first and foremost, you need to be investing in this space so you have credibility and you can actually share your experience with somebody else, because that will build trust like nothing else. When I talk to a new investor and I say, I'm personally in 24 deals as an LP, I've invested in 9 operators across 6 different asset classes. I know what it's like to have Susie behind the counter at the bank tell me that my 50 grand is getting wired to somewhere in Ethiopia or something. I know what it's like to not have K1s coming in time and have to get an extension for the first time in my life, right? I know what it's like where distributions to stop and know what kind of impact that has. So first and foremost, invest in some of these deals, okay? Secondly, I would say take one of those deals you invested in and dumb it down to 3 or 4 slides and put your own branding on it and start circulating that around and tell everybody that you know that this is the type of deal that I raise capital for. When I find a deal like this, will you invest with me? Like very directly, will you? And after you get $500,000 to $700,000 in soft commits for that magical deal, that becomes your asset. And then that's what you go shop to the people that you know, like, and trust, and that you've already vetted. So that's kind of my, 5-step process to capital raising.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
think transparency is extremely important as well. Just
Yeah.
being upfront with people and be able to tell your story, where you're coming from and what that looks like.
I think when people say that it's easier to capital raise, going back to what Randy said, if you're comparing it to the time it takes to find a deal and to get a deal under contract, and I mean, there's so much work that has to go into that before you can do that. So if you're starting from scratch and you're going to go find your own deal and potentially have other people raise for you, I mean, that's a long process. If you're able to raise capital, that's where I think it's going to get you into your first deal faster. But that's my 2 cents on that phrase that came out, easier to raise capital. But yeah, I think once again, Randy hit the nail on the head. The better prepared you are, the easier it is. And, if you can invest first, definitely do it. So you can talk to your investors with an investor perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, shifting a little bit here, when you look at this could be very deal specific, but when you look for like risk mitigation strategies, what are you looking for, or what do you like to see before investing in a deal or before bringing a deal to investors?
So risk mitigation is just basically like, how can this deal go wrong and what are the options to kind of fix it, right? So if you've got multiple exit strategies on the back end, that's a good thing. If you've got one type of seller or one type of buyer and one type only that's going to buy this thing, the more specific that needs to be, the harder that's going to be to hit on the back end. So, it's just like insurance. So if you are concerned about interest rates, get fixed rate debt, right? If you are concerned about property managers and you can bring it in-house, bring it in-house so you can control it that much more. If construction, the same thing. That's why I like in-house construction and property management. The more you can control of this, and the more you can bring your expertise to the table, the better. So fortunately, real estate is very, very flexible in that. I mentioned I did some turnkeys early on. Like, those were terrible, terrible, terrible buys. I never should have bought them. I sunk so much money into them. But real estate is very forgiving. And since I didn't have any crazy type of financing on those deals, I held those just long enough to make a positive return on those. So if you have flexibility on when you exit, over any amount of time, real estate's going to increase in value. And if you're tied into selling at any given point, then that's going to just open up your risks. So put the things in place that keep you from having to make decisions and take action when it's not the most opportune time.
I'm going to put my old Marine hat on that I haven't pulled off the shelf in a while. One thing I think the military does very well is risk management, and I think it's a different level, when you're planning for, combat operations, because the risk is a lot greater. I mean, you do bad in multifamily, you lose money. You do, poorly in a combat operation, you lose people and lives, so the Marine Corps had a really, really solid risk mitigation program or risk management program. And essentially, I would say you take a page out of the Army playbook when you're looking at mitigating risks and just follow exactly what it says. I'm assuming the Army playbook is very similar to the Marine Corps playbook when it comes to that. So Yeah, you list down all your risks, you try to mitigate them. And, once you've done your best to mitigate the risks and establish controls, you reassess and say, is this still worth doing? And if the answer is yes, you go. If the answer is no, you don't.
Yeah, no, for sure. Risk mitigation, making that what that looks like, analyzing from every perspective, every angle. Another thing I'd like to add too would be backwards planning, beginning with the end in mind, like seeing the project through all the way. Like, yes, we can acquire this deal, but what would that look like on the back end when we go to either refinance or sell on it?
All right. We are about out of time. We're kind of like on that little threshold, but we're just going to call it now. But one last question for each of you. And Randy, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to find me is on LinkedIn under Randy Smith, but I do have a website, impactequity.net, and my podcast is The Gentle Art of Crushing It. And of course, for folks that are interested in new, that want to look into investing passively, I've got a really great guide, which is called a Sales Professional's Guide to Passive Investing in Real Estate. And it's a free download on my website, impactequity.net.
Awesome. We'll put all that information in the show notes. And Tommy, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So really easy to find me on LinkedIn. So under Thomas Feraco. You can check out our page as well, Rolling Rook, ROOK Capital. Page is on LinkedIn as well. And then follow me on Instagram at Tommy Feraco, all lowercase.
Easy peasy. Awesome. Hey, well, thanks guys for coming on the show today, and appreciate your time. And that's a wrap on this one.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call a Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.